All right, everybody, I should be live. And of course, that's a question I have just about every week here, but welcome back to another Monday. And if you can hear me and see me, both would be great. Please let me know in the chat so we can get started tonight talking about how our enemies are using South America as a staging ground for war, or so it would seem, and that's why the thumbnail says death from below. Because one thing a lot of people tend to discuss quite often is the fact that here in the United States, as well as in North America in general, we're separated by two oceans on either side that protects us from things like foreign invasion or anything else related to conflict. But a lot of people tend to forget that there is this gigantic landmass attached to us from below in our southern hemisphere that likes to, well, have problems from time to time. So I see people saying preemptive 5x5. Thanks, Robert P., for that. I also see 5x5s coming in from Rocket, as well as Sniper161718 saying 5x5.56. So good to see everybody. Dave Sickles, good to see you as well. Also have Kevin Ramsey here moderating tonight. Thanks for your help with that. Gen X Gemini, Mr. Landfill, and all the good people that I always appreciate. Thank you so much for hanging out tonight, and I hope everybody is getting prepared for Christmas and whatever other holiday you might be enjoying. Of course, I do want to mention Midway USA, biggest support of the channel. Thanks to them, I can get out here, do live streams like this, give you good information and more motivation to prepare. And if you need to prepare, of course, they have a lot of the things that you might be interested in acquiring. So, big thanks to Midway USA. Now, Cowboy32 Actual, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And let's just say things are going to get very interesting here very soon. And I do bring a lot of attention to our southern border as well as everything below it in order to give you, at least in my opinion, the best concept as to where you can expect or anticipate danger to come from here in these coming months. Because once this new administration takes over, we will see a heightened risk environment based on the actions that they are anticipated to take. And that's something that I definitely want to pay attention to because things are going to escalate quickly in that regard. Army Sapper, good to see you. I officially appreciate it. And King Nothing 86, I guess I got caught onto your sentence there for a second at the same time. And you're on Christmas break, and you totally forgot what day it was. And you know what? I'm glad you made it. So thanks for being here. Now, John Duss says, people need to get over the drone nonsense first. And unfortunately, if we were being told the truth from the government as to what the purpose and the reasoning for all of that activity was, it would be a lot easier to get over. But unfortunately, they're leaving it very mysterious in many ways, which allows people to speculate and then dive deep into conspiracy. And next thing you know, you can't trust any source at all. So it's an unfortunate situation, but here we are. That's why we're not going to talk about it tonight. We have other things to cover, and there are things I want you to consider, especially regarding your personal preparedness. So let's jump right into it, okay? Now, we know that Trump is planning on going very hard on the cartels and the criminal organizations that are coming out of Mexico as well as South America. However, this can have consequences, and there are things that we should consider. So this was from a speech that he had just yesterday on Sunday, and this gives you some ideas as to how quickly this could move regarding the heightened level of risk that these cartels will likely create, okay? In a long speech to conservative followers, the president-elect touched on some of his favorite topics, including tariffs and immigration, and denied that Elon Musk is undermining his power. And this is from December 23rd, okay? That's today. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Sunday added another item to his list of to-dos for his first day in the Oval Office after he is inaugurated on January 20th. All foreign gang members will be expelled, and I will immediately designate the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I will do so immediately, he said during a forum of the ultra-conservative nonprofit organization Turning Point in Phoenix, Arizona, which is dedicated to spreading MAGA values in American colleges and universities. This is not my words, this is the words of the writer, but this is still what is being talked about. Trump said his administration will unleash the full power of federal law enforcement, ICE, Border Patrol, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the intelligence community, and financial sanctions to drive out the foreign drug gangs. Every cartel operating on American soil will be dismantled, deported, and destroyed, Trump said in a speech cheered by hundreds of his supporters. Okay? Now, one thing I want to mention about this is that if you've ever, and this is just like an interesting Hollywood correlation, but I think there's some validity here for you to consider, and I just wanted to use a reference or an example that a lot of people might have memory of, right? So if you've ever watched the movie Sicario 2, in Sicario 2, there was an attack that led the President of the United States to declare the drug cartels a terrorist organization. And what that did was it immediately made things a little bit crazy, right? But one thing that was mentioned in that movie that I find to be likely accurate was the fact that this is good for business for the cartels, right? So you create a more difficult path to profiting off of what cartel activities they're currently engaged in regarding trafficking or drugs or human trafficking or anything else, like any of the cartel activity that's out there. If you make it more difficult to actually be successful with those activities, they become more valuable, which means they can charge more for those services because the products that they're trying to smuggle through the southern border become scarce, right? So it has an effect that is required, but it has the opposite effect in the sense of actually improving the level of business that they want to, or that they're able to profit off of. So these are just considerations to make, but I just found that to be an interesting correlation based on something that a lot of people might be able to reference and put one and one together, right? So just something to keep in mind that even with this being maybe the right thing to do, it does increase some other issues that currently maybe we're not quite seeing yet, okay? Now here they talk about wanting to do this in his first term. They didn't necessarily get to it. Then he also talks about the Venezuelans from Trinidad and Aragua that are in Colorado and everything else there. And that is something we're going to discuss here later tonight because it is an issue that has kind of evolved and turned into a new story. That's something that's just a warning to all Americans in general that I want you to be aware of, okay? And then, of course, they go over here to try to make the president-elect look bad based on his statements. But this is also something I want to touch base on. These statements were reminiscent of the war on drugs launched by President Richard Nixon in the 1970s, which reached its climax in the 1980s and 90s, with famous slogans such as First Lady Nancy Reagan's "Just Say No." We are going to discuss something related to Reagan here in just a minute. The hardliners of the Republican Party have been calling for the designation of organizations such as the Sinaloa Cartel or the Jalisco Nueva Generacion Cartel as terrorists for a couple of years, and for applying to them the same medicine that the Islamic State received in the Middle East. These die-hard Trumpists would welcome selective attacks to decapitate these organizations, even though such a thing would run completely contrary to international law and would leave Mexico in a difficult position as the victim of an invasion of its national sovereignty from which it would be difficult to defend itself without unleashing a serious crisis in the region. Now, I think there's some things that we should agree on here. Yes, this creates a big tension between the United States and Mexico when it comes to sovereignty. But here's the thing, and I want you guys to kind of keep this in mind. Right now, Mexico is doing nothing to stop what's happening to our country. They're not doing anything to stop the flow of human smuggling, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and in fact, in all honesty, the Mexican military, law enforcement entities, and the government itself are all compromised and corrupted by the cartel organizations as of right now. Somebody in every single echelon of their government, military, or police forces is associated with the cartel and on the cartel payroll to a degree. So at a certain point, you can't expect them to take care of this on their own. So what else are you supposed to do? And in fact, if they're complicit in these crimes and if they're complicit in what's happening to our country in the sense of deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans and the kidnapping and the trafficking of American children and as well as American adults mixed with the trafficking and kidnapping of children from Mexico and South American countries, all of that ends up being their fault. And in fact, some of them are actually directly involved in it. So at that point, who cares, right? Basically, I don't give a shit what Mexico says or thinks because at this point in time, we're going to have to do whatever we got to do to try to get things fixed. And right now, a lot of really bad things are happening because of their lack of action. And not to mention the fact that they're also the ones who make it so their citizenry can basically not own firearms, have no rights to self-defense, have no way of dealing with the fact that these threatening criminal organizations exist in the first place, and look how it's turned out. So that's where we are right now. But this is going to create a much more risky environment, especially regarding the fact that we know as soon as they start getting targeted, as soon as they start getting sanctioned, as soon as they start losing access to the border and everything else, it makes their products more valuable, which means business is booming, right? So there's going to be a stronger push to do more than what they're already doing. And we also know that they're going to retaliate to some degree. What that retaliation looks like, I don't know for a fact, but this is something that you should anticipate starting January 20th. I mean, Donald Trump himself is saying this is going to happen immediately, right? So, moving forward, all right? I usually watch Match Prepper on replay. I can't believe I caught a live stream. Well, Carolina Oma Steph, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you got on a live for once. So that's super cool, and thanks for being here. Now, let's see here. Rob Thurman says, take Mexico out. I don't think that's the right move per se. What I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't feel like we can't do what we need to do based on the fact that they are allowing what's happening to our country, in all honesty. I don't know what else to say. I mean, they're working directly with China, by the way, in a lot of aspects regarding this entire situation. Mike H., $10. My bum is on Mexico's lips. Well, I'm glad that we both grew up with Tom Green, even though that might make us bad people. At least we're both aware of what your reference is. Let's talk about one of my concerns regarding a certain situation that just happened. You remember Syria? Yeah, that's a thing. So here's one of the concerns I have. They're talking about decapitating these cartels, taking out their leaders, right? You got to cut off the head of the snake in order to defeat the body, right? And everything else related to weird, warlike nuance that I have no experience in. But what I do have experience in is a reading. And I read sometimes, and I can take information that I read and put it together with other information I have read and say, well, this is concerning, and that's what we're doing right now. So let's do that together, all right? So this is what we're talking about now regarding the current state of Syria. U.S. drops $10 million reward for arrest of Syria's new leader after Damascus talks. And now I'm starting to get a little concerned, because are we actually going to go into Mexico or go on to the border and remove these cartels from the equation, or are we going to replace their leadership with leaders who are more amicable to what people in our administrative class would like to work with, right? I don't know, but I have a feeling that there's probably a relatively high chance of that happening. And that's definitely concerning, because that makes things worse in the long run. And so I don't want to see that happen. I mean, we're kind of in a situation where it's like total annihilation or nothing, right? Because if you get rid of a cartel leader, a new one pops up, and sometimes 10 to 20 to 30 to 50 pop up, right? Depending on how splintered that organization becomes due to that decapitation. But what if you replace their leader with somebody that you can work directly with, even if they're a really bad person? Because apparently we're willing to do that in places like Syria. So why would I assume we wouldn't do that in Mexico or in South America? Or in countries like Venezuela? Is that something we should talk about tonight? Oh yeah, we will later. But right now, let's talk about this, okay? A senior diplomat has announced that the United States is dropping a $10 million reward for the arrest of Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, after an uprising that toppled President Bashar al-Assad. Oh, okay. He was worth $10 million before, but now, he's in charge, so it's fine. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs Barbara Leaf made the announcement on Friday after she and other U.S. officials visited the Syrian capital, Damascus, to hold talks with the new Syrian administration. It was the first visit by U.S. diplomats to Syria since al-Assad was removed from power earlier this month, in a lightning offensive led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, which is designated a terrorist organization, by the way. The U.S., however, had designated HTS a terrorist organization in 2018. Al-Sharaa, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, is the group's leader and was once aligned with Al-Qaeda. Well, no big deal, I guess. He was the leader of a terrorist organization for the last 6 years. He was also aligned with Al-Qaeda, which, from my understanding, was considered to be bad guys for quite a decent amount of time, but also created by the CIA, I believe. So I don't know. I'm just some guy who reads things on the internet sometimes, but now he's fine. So nothing to worry about here. Leaf said that the U.S. decided to drop the reward for al-Sharaa after receiving positive messages during Friday's discussions, including a promise to ensure that terrorist groups cannot pose a threat. I mean, can you just imagine being there in this negotiating room, right? And just talking to this new leader of Syria and going, well, do you promise that terrorist groups won't be a threat? And he's all, I promise. And they're like, okay, well, we'll get rid of your $10 million bounty then. But, better not let those terrorist groups pose a threat. Okay, I promise, right? So, this is what we just did in Syria. I am not very confident that we wouldn't try to do the same exact BS in Mexico or at the southern border when it comes to these criminal organizations. And that's concerning because, well, I don't care who you are or who you work with or what type of promises they make. If we have people in our government, which we already do, who are willing to just look the other way or work directly with somebody who a few years ago would have been worth $10 million because of the atrocious crimes they've committed, aka other members of other cartels or, I don't know, second in commands or whoever it may be, well, then those people are now just complicit in what it is that person either used to do or is still doing, or likely both. So just be aware that this is something that is just status quo for us. Now, this also got me considering a Reagan-esque scenario that occurred back in the day that I wanted to remind you of, because there's a lot of weird correlations here. And I think when it comes to designating the cartels a terrorist organization, and when it comes to having a serious situation like we just witnessed involving these other countries like Russia and Iran, and of course having this leader that we suddenly just like said is fine and everything else, well, there was something that happened back in the day that gives me some weird thoughts about this entire situation. Silent guard. So basically we're going to have Russia, China, North Korea, and the cartel busting through our southern border all at once. Yes, but not quite, because they're still going to use fifth-generation warfare tactics rather than straight-up invasionary tactics. So we're not going to see it happen, but it is going to happen, but just not publicly and not telegraphed, if that makes any sense. Or at least that's my opinion, okay? So, Chupacabra says, at this point, we need to do a deep investigation of every single official and do some snap elections to have healthier, hopefully less corrupt people making decisions. Yes, but that just won't happen, unfortunately. And that's just the truth. And I'm sorry to break it to you, and it's upsetting to me as well, but corruption will maintain its course. I have unfortunate guarantees of. And Sonoran guy, that's good, man. You should be a voice actor. I don't know who we're talking to or if it's you're talking to me, but then you said, not. And so that was a great joke. All right, now, remember the Iran-Contra affair? I just want to touch base on this really quick to give you some ideas about how some of this could work out and be very problematic for us as American citizens, not just as Americans, and not just be, concerning ourselves as like a nation state, but concerning ourselves as just regular people, okay? And just to give you some ideas here, why this has some weird correlations, at least in my opinion, okay? Just to give you this overview, if you don't remember it or you're not very versed in what happened here or whatever, okay? So back when Reagan was president, we had the Sandinistas in Nicaragua fighting the Contras, right? And it was basically like a basic civil war, right? An insurgency. And the CIA was training and assisting the Contras, and as well as other anti-communist groups around the world at the time. And then the Democrats within our government shut it down, basically saying that we were no longer able to fund any activities regarding direct support of the Contras in Nicaragua. So Reagan told his national security advisor that I want you to do whatever you have to do to help these people keep body and soul together. So what they did was they took a deal with Iran to basically sell them weapons to get hostages back that we had taken from us at the time, which didn't work out the way it was supposed to. But also at the same time, we weren't allowed to sell weapons to Iran, so that was already immediately illegal. And guess what? The whole support the people any way you can, whatever you have to do, turned into, hey, that money Iran paid us for those weapons, well, some of it, actually like most of it, ended up in Nicaragua, in the hands of the Contras. We're not really sure what happened. And so you can see that even historically with a president like Ronald Reagan, which a lot of people consider to be one of the better conservative presidents, of our time, even with a president like that, they were willing to do whatever it took, which I could see Trump kind of moving forward with regarding, the drug cartels. Because in all honesty, and this is just me saying this as a concerned citizen, you probably will have to do whatever it takes if you actually want to deal with those people. You can't just, follow the rules and expect them to disappear. That's not really how it's going to work because they're not bound by any rules at all, right? So I could see that route being taken, but then what will happen regarding these people who are in the way, these obstacles, these roadblocks, who will then create a scenario that ends up maybe creating something illegal in the process, right? And so that's what happened with Iran-Contra. And so I have zero doubt that if this is what happens and we move forward with this criminal cartel organization scenario where they're designated as terrorist groups and then we start using military action against them, that we will see this type of thing start to occur. And that's going to be a big problem for all of us, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on or what you're concerned about, because it will create more dangerous scenarios in other places in the meantime involving foreign adversaries almost guaranteedly, because China is directly involved with the cartels at this point in time. We also have countries like Venezuela we're dealing with. We have Russia and Iran involved with all these countries as well. It's becoming very multifaceted, and that's going to be a problem for us because it's going to create additional conditions that we're not necessarily prepared for. So I wanted to make a funny post, but YouTube says no. It says tap rack stovepipe. Well, I'm sorry. YouTube does that sometimes. Excellent book recommendation, Blood of Brothers, Life and War in Nicaragua in 1991. There you go. I think that I would definitely look at that book because I've never heard of that before. So let's see here. My SHTF vehicle is a polk sled. Okay. Well, hey, you got to use what you got. Don't worry about it. Don't let anyone judge you, okay? Now, Paladin One says, at this point, no one knows what is going to happen, but it's still interesting to talk about. And I agree with you there. We don't know what's going to happen, and it is interesting to talk about. But I do want to try to bring things back down to a more logical or likely scenario when we have these discussions. So we could go talk about a zombie apocalypse, or we could talk about the amount of investment our foreign adversaries are making into South America and then ask ourselves a question, why, right? So at least I feel like in the realm of reality a little bit more often these days than maybe where we used to be, but it's still hard to say because you know what, at any moment, a tactical nuclear weapon could be used in Eastern Europe and then things could change in an instant as to what our biggest threat is concerning the use of weapons of mass destruction, right? So who knows what is really going to happen? I totally agree with you there. Now, and I hope you know, I don't ever try to, put it out there as if I know exactly what's going to happen. That's why I rarely ever put, videos out where it's 3 days until you're all going to die, right? Because that's not how I do things. And in case you didn't know, YouTube is actually starting a new thing where they're going to crack down on clickbait. And I found that to be interesting because I think it might affect certain people pretty heavily, and I feel like that's, maybe good for the viewing experience, of course, but also could hurt some people's ability to put out information in the way they have been for quite some time. And just to kind of show you what that update is, because I just found it to be very interesting. Here you go, based on this current conversation. YouTube launches massive clickbait crackdown. I can't talk tonight, I guess. New enforcement targets, misleading thumbnails, false promises and titles, and news and current events focus, starting in India and then rolling out globally. And of course, a video title saying the president resigned, where the video doesn't address the president's resignation. A thumbnail that says top political news on a video that doesn't include any news coverage, right? So they're giving you examples, they're telling you they're going to do this. They're starting in India. This will eventually hit us here in the US and everywhere else. And maybe it's a good thing, right? I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I almost feel like it might be a good thing, okay? Now, let's talk about what else is going on in South America. I told you our enemies are staging a war from South America. That's at least what it looks like to me, right? And I honestly think that it's an overlooked security risk that we don't spend enough time discussing. This is from La Prensa, which is, or La Prensa, sorry. I'm not good at Spanish anymore because I don't work in restaurant kitchens very often anymore. There is a newspaper in Nicaragua, apparently, and this is the one. So, Gerasimov, Russian chief of the general staff. Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Iran are strategic partners. This is from the 18th of December this year. So, just be aware, if you're new here, we do go over news that's from within the previous week, and sometimes we go further back just to build context. And of course, if you're on Replay Crew, make sure you check it in the comments because I really appreciate seeing you guys check in. It just kind of gives me more motivation to do these live streams and put that information out for you all. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button because you won't know that these live streams are happening otherwise. So, I guess hit the like button too because that's what everybody wants you to do. The chief of the general staff of the Russian armed forces, Army General Valery Gerasimov, stated that there is active cooperation with countries in Latin America, emphasizing that Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are considered strategic partners. He also highlighted Iran's role in the maritime security belt formed by Russia, Iran, and China. During a briefing for military attachés from foreign countries organized by the Russian Ministry of Defense, Gerasimov stated that active cooperation is underway with Latin American countries. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are currently our strategic partners. Cooperation in the field of defense will continue to be strengthened. Okay. He added that as part of the cooperation with Iran, a naval exercise involving Russia, Iran, and China titled Maritime Security Belt was conducted in March in the northern Indian Ocean. Right. So obviously those three are buddy-buddy. And I think we all know that the modern axis of evil, at least from what we're being told by the mainstream media, I would say, is going to be North Korea, Iran, or North Korea, Russia, Iran, and China. North Korea is part of it too, but they're just China 2.0. Nicaragua is an observer nation in Ocean 2024. Ocean 2024 is the main training event of the Russian armed forces, involving forces from the fleets and the Caspian Sea Flotilla, as well as units and military groups from the aerospace forces. In this exercise, Nicaragua was among the 11 observer nations. The observer nations also included China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Qatar, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Vietnam, and India. So, understand that Nicaragua is the only South American country in there, but in Central American, if you want to put it that way, but they are there and they are part of this conglomerate at this point in time, okay? And then they talk about Kazakhstan and some other countries as well. But then also, this is what I found very interesting, because I didn't know about this, and I thought that you might find it interesting, that Russia is this involved with these countries at this point in time that they're training their law enforcement officers. Russia's influence in Central America is becoming increasingly evident, with Nicaragua serving as one of the entry points for the country into the region. A report from pro-government media in July stated that among 755 police officers graduated by Moscow University, part of the Russian Ministry of the Interior, there were members of the police forces from Nicaragua and El Salvador, the only Central American countries participating in these training programs. According to these reports, in July of this year, 3 members of the Sandinista police graduated as specialists in forensic expertise and psychology. Between 2017 and 2022, the Russian Training Center in Managua graduated 1,700 police officers from 13 Latin American countries through 20 training programs on topics such as drug trafficking, organized crime, cybersecurity, corruption, economic crimes, among others, as explained by Oleg Alexandrovich, the center's director, during a graduation ceremony in 2022. However, it was not specified how many of these graduates were from Nicaragua and how many were from El Salvador. Now, here's what I want you to really consider here. Russia is training the law enforcement of Nicaragua and El Salvador. Okay, and Nicaragua, clearly an influential country in the sense of being able to be influenced, right? And Russia creating this relationship and this partnership with Nicaragua. And they train them in everything related to what you would use in a subversionary tactic, right? So what are they trained in? Once again, drug trafficking. So you're listening to this as if they're being trained how to combat drug trafficking, but wouldn't this also teach you how to be good at it? So they're training them in drug trafficking, organized crime. What are they training in? How to stop it or how to join it? Cybersecurity. Do I have to go on? Corruption. They're being trained on corruption. See what I'm saying? This is very interesting to me, that they're training these police forces in these Latin American countries on all the things that are 100% associated with fifth generation warfare. And they just so happen to be doing it right below us, right south of us in Nicaragua, right? So, just something I found interesting. Now, Gen X Gemini, I wasn't notified tonight. I even went to your channel page and didn't see anything about there was going to be a live stream. Yeah, it's been weird about that lately. Sometimes I jump on my own channel page and it's not showing up, and I have to click on the live tab just to see that there is a live stream occurring. So what I would do, and just so, to help anybody who's new here that wants to be part of these live streams on a weekly basis, they're almost every Monday at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. And if it's not here, I'll post about it somewhere saying, hey, I have to cancel for this, that, or another reason. But regardless, if you want to find out, go to your subscriptions tab on your YouTube main page. And if any of your subscription channels are live streaming, they should be at the very top of the page. And that should help you find anyone who's gone live that you actually subscribe to. So that might be one way to find it a little bit easier in the future if you ever run into that again, okay? So, at Potato Head, Merry Christmas. And I'm saying it too. Merry Christmas, all right? Now, here's something you should definitely be thinking about, okay? I told you that Trump is going to designate cartels as terrorist organizations, or so he says, okay? I also told you what just happened in Syria, where the regime that was there was toppled and replaced with somebody that we just decided to take a $10 million bounty off of their head. and that we clearly had nothing to do with. He wasn't associated with Al-Qaeda, and the CIA at the same time, definitely not, right? And so we definitely didn't have plans for this person to take over, and definitely didn't already let them know that we'd get rid of that $10 million bounty before we went there to have a conversation where they could promise that there won't be any terrorist activity. So, none of that happened beforehand and was predetermined 100%. But just throwing it out there, like if it was, right? So if Trump goes in and starts doing decapitation strikes on drug cartels, and we're clearly showing that we're willing to replace heads of state or, leaders of criminal organizations that have a bigger economy than the country they're operating in, with people who, we might work with directly, I would say that there's a country you need to be paying attention to right now that has a lot of parallels to Syria regarding who they associate with, regarding their economic situation, regarding the distrust of the population of the current regime, and is heavily involved militarily with some of our greatest adversaries, who doesn't play nice with us right now and would be problematic for us if we were to find ourselves in an open war. Who am I talking about? Hey, chat. I implore you to guess. I'm sure many of you can because you're very smart people. And the reason I know you're smart is because you're concerned with preparing for possible events in the future, which, takes a level of intelligence to understand as a possibility. So, Romans 12:18, you are the winner. I don't really think you win anything per se, but you win tonight for being smart and awesome. Okay, Venezuela. Now, let's see here. Romans 12:18. I wonder if I can do anything cool for you. Like, can I highlight your chat thing at least? Let's see here. Can't do anything super fun I could put you in timeout. That would be super messed up. But what I can do is show your chat. So yeah, there you go. Romans 12:18 for the win with the correct guess, which I'm sure many of you could have figured out. Now, there we are. Hide it again. Listen to this. Tell me what you think. I think this is a real concern that you guys should be watching out for 100%. Okay, a fragile alliance, what Assad's fall means for Maduro in Venezuela. It's from December 22nd. The collapse of Bashar Assad's regime in Syria reverberates far beyond the Levant, shaking the foundations of other autocratic regimes. Among these, Nicolas Maduro's government in Venezuela faces a stark warning. An erosion of external support can dismantle even the most entrenched dictatorships. Assad's fall highlights not only the fragility of authoritarian regimes, but also the growing impatience of populations living under decades of repression. For Maduro, it underscores how reliance on foreign backers like Russia could lead to a similar unraveling. Assad's ouster dismantled a regime notorious for its extreme violence and dependence on external allies, particularly Russia and Iran. When the support of those allies wavered, Assad's hold on power crumbled. For Maduro, the parallels are striking. His survival strategy mirrors Assad's reliance on Moscow, but Russia's capacity to sustain its regime is rapidly diminishing. The war in Ukraine has severely strained Russia's resources, with reports indicating more than $200 billion spent and approximately 700,000 casualties suffered. These immense demands have drained Moscow's ability to prioritize distant allies such as Venezuela, rendering Maduro increasingly vulnerable. Venezuela has long been dependent on Russia for military equipment, financial support, and political backing. Since the mid-2000s, Russia has supplied Venezuela with more than $10 billion in military hardware, including jet fighters and missile systems. Additionally, Russian oil giant Rosneft has invested billions in Venezuela's oil industry, providing critical lifelines to the regime. With Russia now consumed by the Ukraine conflict, those supports are at risk, leaving Maduro's government increasingly exposed. Venezuela also faces mounting internal pressures, economic collapse, mass immigration, and persistent political unrest. A weakened Russia compounds those challenges, threatening Maduro's grip on power. Just as Assad's fall exposed Iran's diminished influence, a collapse in Venezuela would highlight Russia's limitations and further isolate its remaining allies. Who benefits from that the most? Not Russia, not Iran, not China. We do. I expect to see what happened in Syria happen in a place like Venezuela at any moment. Now, will it possibly never? Sure. I can't guarantee these things are going to happen. But I'm definitely keeping an eye on Venezuela for that type of activity because it would be destabilizing in the area. It would hit Russia with a huge blow in the sense of having the staging ground available to them in South America. But it would also just be opportunistic for our deeper state, let's just say. The one that likes to go in and topple regimes and replace them with people who they can work with, right? And then maybe create another revenue stream for the military-industrial complex. So that is an expectation I have. Not to mention how resource-rich Venezuela is. Even though it's expensive to access it, it's still there. Now, this is something you should definitely be aware of. Because right now, Venezuela has been sending the worst of the worst to our country, which may be sort of like an insurance policy, right? So keep this in mind. But it is true, the parallels are there, and this could easily happen. If we go in and try to topple the Maduro regime, and we fail, what happens here in the States with the at least tens of thousands of Venezuelans, if not more, that have made their way into the country, especially the ones associated with these violent criminal organizations? And at the same time, if we fail, do they have to begin their plans sooner in order to get them accomplished, right? These are things you definitely have to consider. And another thing I want to mention is that with Syria and what we witnessed there, right? It's pretty obvious that it required that level of insurgency to begin with. It required that level of civil war to be occurring for everything to happen in a way that was easily digested by the rest of the Western world, right? So we've already had mass protests. We've already had civil unrest in Venezuela. We've already had contested elections there. And we've already had mass arrests of political prisoners when it comes to people who disagreed with the election results, as well as with what Maduro has been doing. So the environment is very ripe for civil unrest and flat-out civil war. And so that would be a good precursor to kind of be aware of the fact that they're heading in that direction. And I have zero doubts that certain people would be involved in making sure that that happens. Certain people would be involved in pushing that forward, right? So this is just my 2 cents, but keep an eye on Venezuela. Our enemies are using Venezuela right now as a place to begin their attack from if it ever comes to that. And it would behoove our government to remove their ability to use that country for those purposes. However, what would be required and what would be generally done in order to accomplish that mission has its own risks and its own consequences as well. So, speaking of Venezuela, and speaking of what they might decide to do if we interfere, right? Which Maduro, by the way, is very well aware of the fact that the United States is willing to interfere in what happens there. He's very well aware of the fact that we might go in there with economic hitmen and topple the whole thing. So he knows this. So if we show our hand too soon and things start to pop off, maybe there's a reason why all these people are showing up in the country. And these people are doing some crazy stuff. Now, this isn't necessarily something I can correlate to the Nicolas Maduro regime directly. But we do know that all of these like failed states, when it comes to their governments, work directly with the criminal enterprises there within. And the other thing that we have to understand is that the people who were involved with this particular crime in Colorado involving Tren de Aragua, the people who were abducted and, beaten, right, and even stabbed, those people, it was done to them for a reason that you need to be concerned about as someone who is an American citizen that wants to be prepared, okay? This is a lesson you need to learn right now because these are the types of tactics that will be used against you if you find yourself at the wrong place at the wrong time, okay? So, good night, Robert Larson. Thank you for being here. 11 people, including some members of a Venezuelan gang, are facing potential criminal charges in connection with the violent abduction and beating of a couple this week at an apartment complex in a Denver suburb, police said Friday. Oh, this is not Aurora? Oh, wait, it is. Wait, no, it's not. It's in Denver. Hold on. What's going on? I thought this was an isolated incident. 8 of those suspects were being held by the Federal Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency after initially being detained by police in Aurora, and another 3 have yet to be arrested. No charges have been filed yet. Some of those facing charges have been identified as members of Tren de Aragua, a gang that started in an infamously lawless Venezuelan prison, Aurora Police Chief Todd Chamberlain said during a news conference providing an update on the case. One of those facing charges is a man who was among 6 armed men seen knocking on an apartment door at the complex in a viral video in August, shortly before a fatal shooting outside, Chamberlain said. Police believe the 20-year-old man wore a woman's wig and hat to avoid being found by police, then Chamberlain said. The man was already wanted by police on burglary and menacing charges based on what was seen in the video. With his detention in the latest incident, 4 of the 6 men from August's video have now been taken into custody. Chamberlain said this week's attack on a husband and wife stemmed from a video the wife took last month of 2 women fighting at the complex that also showed other people who were engaged in criminal behavior. The video was posted online, he said. The armed group that accosted the couple took them to a vacant apartment where the couple was bound and beaten and the husband was stabbed, he said. The suspects took the wife's phone and destroyed the images of the fight. Chamberlain said their apartment was also burglarized. Excuse me. The couple also told police that the people who held them for roughly 5 hours had been extorting $500 from them regularly. Police are investigating whether other residents were also being forced to pay the suspects. Now, here's the lesson of this whole situation. First off, they're here. The criminal organizations are here. They're taking over apartment complexes. They're kidnapping people. They're beating them, and they're stealing their property and extorting them for money. This is already happening. What if these people get activated or get told to do whatever it is that they might be here to do based on the current situation occurring in Venezuela or the current situation occurring with drug cartels and criminal organizations once Donald Trump allows the DEA or the FBI or Homeland Security or even the military to go in and just start taking people out, right? If this is what we're getting already just from petty crime, what's going to happen once that all begins? And now the moral of this story is that the reason this happened to these people is because they took a video of 2 women fighting and posted it online. Little did they know, possibly, like they might not have known at all, that in that video, there were people doing criminal activities in the background. And those people came and found them and kidnapped them and beat the crap out of them and stabbed them and took their phone and broke it because of that video that they posted online. So this is something that you need to think about and you need to learn right now before you do any of that kind of activity. We all see it all the time on X, on TikTok, and all these other apps. If people videotape someone fighting or doing something illegal or doing something crazy, and they immediately post it online. We are entering an era where we're going to war with drug cartels and criminal gang organizations. And the last thing you can do is create a target on your back by posting videos of people breaking the law. I understand that video might be good evidence in the sense of something regarding a criminal case, right? And so taking video of somebody doing something illegal might be worth doing, either to protect yourself or in order to submit that evidence in order to ensure that people are dealt the justice they deserve. But at the same time, don't post it online, especially on your personal account where they can track it back to you and where they can say, hey, that's the person who made it so I went to jail. That's the person who lost me $10,000 worth of drugs. That's the person who got me and my buddies all on the, police's map. And so those people actually got off pretty lightly considering they survived, right? That doesn't always happen, especially when we're talking about these extremely violent criminal organizations and drug cartels. So you need to be very careful and understanding of the threat level before you just start posting things willy-nilly just because you filmed it and thought it was crazy, right? This is a problem. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be allowed to post whatever you want. You sure are able to. Go for it. But understand the risks and understand that those risks are increasing every day the more we engage with these criminal organizations. And by accidentally outing a member of a drug cartel for doing something illegal and maybe getting them arrested because of that video, you have just become a target. You've just put a bounty on your back, and somebody might come collect that bounty at some point in time. And guess what? You made it really easy for them because you have an internet footprint. They will find you, they'll find your address, and they will hunt you down. So please be smart about these things moving forward as we enter this more tumultuous time. Do I believe that we need to take action when it comes to protecting Americans from what these organizations are doing? Yes, I do. But you have to up your level of security and up your level of safety in the process because there is going to be crossfire and there are going to be people caught in the collateral damage of this entire movement. And so do whatever you can to eliminate any risks you don't need to take. Okay? Now, Yardbirds is worried about the UFO aliens that are going to beat him up for filming them next time. I don't think you have to worry about them beating you up, but I would worry about them taking you up to their ship and then possibly doing some sort of exploratory medical procedure just to find out like where things come from, right? So be careful with that one. Now, let's talk about, here's just something else to consider too. Remember earlier when I talked about how some of our administrative state are already complicit or already compromised or corrupted by some of these organizations? Well, here's something for you to keep in mind as things get dicier as we move forward, okay? ICE nabs illegal migrant accused of heinous crime and released by Massachusetts Sheriff's Office. If you live somewhere where your law enforcement community doesn't deal with these people in a way that's reasonable, you need to like get out of there. I don't know what else to say. These are dangerous people that are being let right back out on the street after already committing bad crimes. And it's all in the name of, I don't know, whoever is on the payroll, right? So like you need to be very concerned about being in these areas during this time as things get worse, because these crimes will only become more frequent and the atrocities of these crimes will become worse, in my opinion, okay? So an El Salvadorian illegal immigrant wanted for allegedly assaulting a child in the worst of ways has been arrested by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Massachusetts after a local sheriff's office ignored a detainer to hold him. AKA, he was arrested, he was let go by the sheriff's department, and then he was now wanted for going out and doing this to a child, okay? I said its enforcement and removal operations. Boston arrested 55-year-old Hugo Israel Ruiz on December 17th on felony charges of indecent assault and battery on a child under the age of 14, adding that he remains in custody pending immigration and criminal proceedings. Okay? But the sheriff's office that operates the jail ignored the detainer, releasing Ruiz into the public without notifying ICE. Okay? Like, this is happening. So I don't need to go through this whole case to kind of like give you an idea of like what that looks like, but I just wanted to remind you of how backwards everything is right now and how unacceptable that is. And to remind you that if you live somewhere where that's the common approach, or if that's how your law enforcement doctrine currently operates, that you need to reevaluate like your whole situation and whether or not that means just upping your personal security or upping your procedures when it comes to, you know, how your kids or your wife or anybody that's close to you is taken care of during any type of more dangerous scenario. Like, these are all things you have to really think about, because these people, they're not protecting you. They're in all honesty making it more dangerous for you, and they're letting these people out even when they know what it is they've done in the past and what they're willing to do again, most likely. So please just be aware of that. Like, this is where we're at, and you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be logical about the likelihood of this happening, okay? I don't want to see that happen to any of you. I don't want to see it happen to any of your family members. I don't want to see it happen to anyone in general. But this is where we are. Like, it's out of control, right? It's out of control. So let's talk about China, because they are they are a problem in South America as well. And here's something really interesting. The illegal Chinese immigrants who have been flooding the southern border are upset that they're being planned to be deported first. And they're confused by it. And this is some crazy stuff if you ask me. 1 second, please. Just need a little sip before I get going on China, because things can get a little bit heated in this conversation. Okay. And it's also hilarious, so let's go. Undocumented Chinese men say they're baffled by Trump's reported plans to deport them first. What the heck? Why would he want to do that? I'm so baffled. Los Angeles. Kevin Yang, a 46-year-old undocumented immigrant from China, illegal immigrant, said he once felt a sense of indebtedness toward the United States. But now, with President-elect Donald Trump's second term on the horizon, he feels worried and on edge. Probably because you're here illegally? I don't know what to say, man. Probably should have done the right way. I don't know what to tell you. The gratitude I once felt toward the U.S. for accepting me into the country has now shifted to anxiety and fear, Yang said. And I know others in my situation feel the same. What do you mean accepting? We didn't accept you. You came in without any legal proceeding. So I don't know how that's accepting, but here we are. With the incoming Trump administration looking to prioritize deporting Chinese nationals, citing national security concerns, many undocumented Chinese men say they couldn't feel further afield from the reasoning behind the potential policy. That Trump thinks they're assembling an army within the United States? Why does he think that? Several Chinese undocumented migrants who made the trek across the southern border to the United States spoke about Trump's mass deportation plans. Sources close to the Trump campaign had exclusively told NBC News that undocumented Chinese immigrants who are deemed to be of military age will be among the first groups targeted. But having fled their homeland because of political persecution or uprooted their lives for better economic opportunities, many undocumented Chinese men reject the notion of being a threat to the United States as absurd. It's absurd! I can't believe they think this about us, all of us military-aged males that happen to be here on our own. We're not military spies. Do you see anyone buying heavy weaponry or weapons here? Yang said. The fact that Trump says that is completely crazy. I'm sorry, I can't read this with a straight face. Like, this is just kind of too funny to me. Like, yeah, like, that's what he said. And yeah, is it crazy? Like, of course, oh, no one's buying heavy weaponry. Does anyone see anyone buy heavy weaponry? Is that something that anyone watches happen? Not that I know of, so okay, but yeah, it's fine. Not only are we, I don't know, arresting guys who are Chinese nationals flying drones over military bases and then deporting them, but yeah, I don't have any reason to believe that this is a real threat, and it's crazy and absurd that we would think this, okay? Now, here they start talking about how this could be considered as profiling and how they're going to expect to see ICE raids and it's going to inflict cruelty on the immigrants and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, like this has been crazy, okay? While Asian immigrants have long been the fastest growing undocumented population, the number of Chinese nationals crossing into the United States in particular has skyrocketed in recent years. Between fiscal years 2022 and 2024, the number of undocumented Chinese nationals crossing both the northern and southern borders has tripled from just over 27,000 to 78,000. And why would Trump think that, since the majority of them appear to be military-aged males, that they might be assembling an army? I don't know. You tell me. Now, but Trump has repeatedly suggested that military-aged men are conspiring to build an army, okay? So, here's the thing. I don't know what to tell you on this whole thing, but they clearly find it absurd that we would think this. But I think there's good reason to believe it, because there is something else you have to consider. China is really on top of their stuff. China is very technologically driven. And China is very authoritarian when it comes to how they treat their people. They don't even let them use stuff like Instagram, right? So how are 78,000 military-aged men flying from China to Europe to Ecuador to then cross from Ecuador across the southern border? Like, how are they making that trek without China being alerted by anything, right? How is any of this happening to that degree with those numbers, right? That's like assuming that I could order all this crazy stuff off my phone and never get caught, right? Like, of course I'm going to get caught. I did it off my phone. Well, in China, 78,000 military-aged men don't just get to sneak around and do whatever they want. It's an authoritarian regime that uses facial recognition software and ID technology of all types in order to maintain surveillance on just about everybody. Do you remember the lockdowns? So, I don't know. Why do you think they're here? Well, here's the thing. They also seem to have the same level of lockdowns going on in South America when it comes to their ability to surveil everybody. So they're also there watching all these people illegally leave their country and they just let it happen. I find that hard to believe, but let's talk about it. Here's something else you should be aware of. China's digital invasion in Latin America. This is where the fifth generation warfare threat from South America comes directly from. This is how they're going to dig their heels in down south and use this as a forward operating base. This is exactly why you should be paying attention to South America, because nobody does. Everybody's worried about Europe. Everybody's worried about Asia. Nobody looks south. And south is where all the trouble is going to come from. And it already is in many ways. But it's only going to get worse, and our adversaries are definitely trying to make it so. This is an article from literally today, so be aware that this is all new information, okay? China's expansion into Latin America is gaining momentum in the digital realm through artificial intelligence with concerning applications such as surveillance technologies, facial recognition, and disinformation via the so-called deepfakes. In a recent report, Latin America and the New Global Geopolitics, the Peruvian Army Center for Strategic Studies warns that China is increasingly focusing on AI in Latin America to counter the cultural and political views or values of Western countries. In its global security initiative, elaborated through a white paper on the subject, China has expressed interest in working with the region on security issues through the community of Latin American and Caribbean states where the United States is not present. China also highlights data governance, artificial intelligence, and space, emphasizing that it already has a significant presence in the region. Okay? Here's some things to consider that I find interesting. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, 8 of the 10 countries with the highest homicide rates in the world are in Latin America. Yeah, we always look at like Africa and the Middle East as these places where like all these terrible things are constantly occurring. And then we forget that South America and Central America are literally like out of control when it comes to crime. Okay? Hold on. The average annual number of killings, according to a 2023 UNODC study, was 9.3 per 100,000 inhabitants in South America, 16.9 per 100,000 inhabitants in Central America, and 12.7 per 100,000 inhabitants in the Caribbean. Under the pretext of fighting crime, Beijing uses the region as the perfect terrain to test its surveillance equipment and expand its control. For example, the visitor access scanners in many Brazilian prisons are Chinese, manufactured by NewTek, a direct supplier of the Chinese defense industry. In 2020, according to digital news site Politico, the Canadian government produced an internal threat assessment of NewTek and found that X-ray machines would provide numerous opportunities for attack, including through the covert collection of scanning images, compromising of portable electronics and Bluetooth, mobile signal, or even electromagnetic emanation capture. Keep that in mind in case you ever see mass deployments of X-ray machines or metal detectors or any of those other types of security devices here in the US, like at airports. The same year, the U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security blacklisted NewTek for involvement in activities contrary to U.S. national security interests. In April of 2024, NewTek's Dutch and Polish offices were raided by the EU competition regulators for receiving unfair state subsidies. Chinese facial recognition systems are already a reality in many Latin American countries. According to Argentine news site Infobay, in Campinas, in Brazil's state of Sao Paulo, and in at least 78 cities in the state of Bahia, the information collected by Huawei's hundreds of street cameras goes to a single central computerized system. This not only makes it possible to identify and arrest suspects, but also to create a real digital archive. Beyond privacy issues, the problem, according to many experts, is that this data ends up in Beijing's hands. The national intelligence law dictates that all Chinese companies must hand over collected data to the Xi Jinping government. Okay? Now, here's the thing. We also have the Belt and Road Initiative going through South America, just like it is in Africa. And when you start piecing all this together, you have to understand that this is the road work and the infrastructure required for China to control large swaths of the population in these Latin American countries. And it is their way of blackmailing and corrupting politicians. It's their way of blackmailing and corrupting criminal organization leaders. And it's their way of inserting themselves into the discourse within these countries. Now, they're also using deep fakes, and they're also using all types of AI to generate levels of distrust when it comes to governments within the area, and they're trying to destabilize the entire area. So, this is how they start. This is how it begins. And understand that they have all of this technology in Latin America right now. And somehow, just somehow, they've lost track of 78,000 military-aged men that left China, had to make a global-wide airplane trip, and ended up in Latin America, right? Where all this surveillance technology is and where all of this stuff that China's been shipping there for years has been installed. And they're somehow making their trek all the way up from South America through Central America and across our southern border without their involvement or their knowledge at all, right? So, this is how they do it. And understand, it's not going to look like a conventional war. It's not going to be like Russia invading Ukraine. It's going to be like China, Iran, and Russia just slowly morphing South America into a proxy state, into a proxy of the axis of evil in 2024. And once things go hot between our administration that's coming in January and these drug cartels and the criminal organizations they're within, and if we see anything happen in the sense of toppling the Maduro regime or something along those lines, this will be directly involving China, Iran, and Russia in the process. And so understand how dangerous this whole scenario can become. If we get more directly involved in Eastern Europe, of course, we will have to look at our southern border and everyone below us in the south as a potential threat. And that will also require a large amount of resources and security upgrades in order to make sure that we maintain any level of safety. But it might be too late because in all reality, the bad ones are already here. They're already here. They're already ready to go. Bees nuts, are you in a shed? I'm not in a shed. I'm in what is called an addition. It basically connects my house to my garage. So it's not air conditioned and it doesn't have central air of any kind. So it's not very warm. And that can be a problem sometimes. Let's see here. My state is finally recognizing Trinidad and Tobago as a threat. LMAO. Heart Gold 556. What state is that? Just so we can all know. And that way we can kind of see what is you're referring to and why they suddenly have that recognition, right? But this is like what is happening. And listen, I want you guys to know, I wish you a Merry Christmas. I really do. And I honestly hope that none of these threats ever come to fruition and we can just slowly make our way towards a bountiful future. But we have to be reasonable about what can happen. And we have to prepare for it or else it'll just happen without our permission, right? So, and it's not a shed, savagely. God. Also, I want to say this real quick, okay? Because I got into a little spat with somebody over this, and it's important, and you need to be aware of it, especially if you're new here, okay? Because it's almost Christmas, and if I can have one Christmas wish from all of you, and from anyone else who's new here, okay? My wish is that people will stop assuming that I dye my freaking hair. I don't dye my hair. I don't want to have this conversation with anybody else. Somebody says that I'm questionable because of the fact that I dye my hair. One more time, I'm going to lose my mind. I don't have the energy or the time or the effort required to dye a white stripe in my hair 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last 6 years that I've been on frickin' YouTube just to make everybody think I look cool. That's not how it works. It's frickin' natural. You know nothing about hair dye if you think that anyone could possibly upkeep this to the level that I've been able to this entire time. You can't make black hair perfectly white in perpetuity. So I'm sorry, but my Christmas wish is that you could stop thinking that I dye my hair. I certainly do not. My head is basically bald up here because of how white my hair is. I'm sorry that you think I'm attractive. I can't help you with that, but it is what it is, okay? So, anyone else have a question about that? Just keep it to yourself, all right? But honestly, Merry Christmas, everybody. I really appreciate you all. I greatly appreciate the motivation that you provide me with when it comes to preparing and to do these live streams. I really hope that you're willing to come back next week and have another good conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the private live stream here in just a minute. If you want to be part of the private live stream, hit that join button down below. I would love to have you in it. You can just join the channel membership and then go to the channel community tab, which, hold on, let me go over to that really quickly because I didn't post it. So I'm going to do that right now, okay? So if you are a channel member, I am posting that right now so you can join into the private live stream tonight because, I mean, that's kind of like the perk. It'd be kind of messed up for me not to post it. I'm just going to say the private, okay? And it's on my channel tab or on my channel page on the community tab. It starts at 9:15. You can also be part of it if you are a Subscribe Star member. If you want to join the Subscribe Star, it's a way to support the channel directly. There are some additional perks, and I am working on updating those for the new year. I put that in the live chat. It's also in the description. Please take care of your families. Enjoy this time you have with them. Merry Christmas, everybody, and I look forward to talking to you next week. It's Christmas. I have to do the thing. And that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.